There are stories in Hollywood that begin with a dream and end with a standing ovation. And then there are stories like Frank Fritz's, stories that begin with a rusted barn, a warm handshake, and a genuine love for forgotten things, and end in a way that no one who watched him on television could have ever imagined. This is not a story about ratings or reality TV drama. This is a story about a real man, with real health battles, real heartbreak, and a final chapter so devastating it left millions of fans speechless. This is the heartbreaking tragedy of Frank Fritz from American Pickers. To understand what Frank Fritz lost, you first have to understand what he built and where it all started. Frank Fritz was born on October 11, 1965, in Davenport, Iowa, a working-class city hugging the banks of the mighty Mississippi River. From the time he was old enough to wander around, Frank was different from other kids. While his friends chased sports and video games, Frank was digging through old barns, peering into dusty garages, and picking through piles of what most people would call junk. He collected beer cans, stamps, coins, razor blades, anything with age and history behind it. What made Frank special wasn't just that he collected old things. It was that he could look at a rusted, dented, forgotten object and see its story. He saw the people who had once owned it, the era it came from, the craftsmanship that had gone into making it. That was his gift, and it would eventually become his career, his identity, and ultimately one of the greatest joys of his life. Frank wasn't a star student or an athlete. He was just Frank, friendly, unpretentious, and passionate. His father, a salesman, taught him how to connect with people. His mother supported his unusual hobby, even when she didn't entirely understand it. And together, without knowing it, they were raising someone who would one day be watched by millions of people every week on national television. Before any cameras rolled, before any fans recognized his face, Frank Fritz spent nearly 2 decades working as a fire inspector in Iowa. Starting in the 1980s, he developed a disciplined eye for detail, the kind that came from checking buildings for faulty wiring, hidden hazards, and overlooked dangers. It was painstaking, methodical work, and it sharpened Frank's natural instinct for noticing things that other people missed. It was during these inspections that Frank's picking career quietly began. Inside charred buildings and cleared-out firehouses, he began finding vintage helmets, old signs, antique firefighting equipment, things that other inspectors walked right past. He started buying these items for pocket change and selling them to collectors, and the profits surprised him. A classic fireman's helmet picked up for next to nothing might fetch several $100s. Old firehouse signs could bring in even more. Then came the moment that changed everything. During a routine inspection, Frank stumbled upon a small, seemingly unimportant pin. It looked old, even damaged. He bought it for just $15 on a whim. After cleaning it up, he took it to a collector's show and discovered it was a rare fraternal organization badge, over a century old and highly prized among serious collectors. That $15 pin sold for $1,450, a profit of roughly 3,000%. Frank Fritz was hooked. By 2002, Frank had made up his mind. He walked away from the stability of his fire inspector career and committed himself full-time to the world of picking. He opened his own antique store in Savannah, Illinois, calling it Frank Fritz Finds, a cluttered, chaotic, wonderful shop filled with motorcycles, vintage signs, classic oil cans, and antique toys. It was a reflection of Frank's mind, wild, enthusiastic, and deeply authentic. Around the same time, Frank had been crossing paths regularly with a fellow picker and kindred spirit named Mike Wolfe. The two had grown up in neighboring small towns along the Mississippi River, and they shared an almost identical passion for digging up forgotten pieces of American history. When they hit the road together, loading up a van and driving through back roads looking for hidden gems, something magical happened. They were funny together, they were genuine, and they made the whole world of antiques feel exciting and alive. The idea to turn their adventures into a television show wasn't born overnight. For years, Frank and Mike struggled to get anyone in the entertainment industry to take them seriously. They filmed their own adventures, posted videos online in the early days of YouTube, handed out DVDs at swap meets, and knocked on doors that refused to open. Television executives didn't understand the concept. Who they? Ask was going to watch two guys rummage through old barns? After 5 years of persistence, the History Channel finally gave them a chance. American Pickers premiered in January 2010, and almost immediately, it was clear that something special was happening. Viewers didn't just enjoy the show, they fell in love with it. Millions of people tuned in every week, making it one of the biggest reality series the History Channel had ever produced. Merchandise flew off the shelves. Antique stores across America reported busier foot traffic. Garage sales became treasure hunts. Frank Fritz and Mike Wolfe had done something remarkable. They had made history cool again. Frank's role on the show was irreplaceable. While Mike was the outgoing dealmaker, Frank was the quiet expert, the man who could look at a heap of rust and identify exactly what it was, how old it was, and what it was worth. His dry humor, his genuine excitement over obscure finds, and his down-to-earth personality made him enormously relatable. Fans saw themselves in Frank, the guy who wasn't flashy or polished, who just loved what he loved and was incredibly good at it. Together with Danielle Colby, who managed Mike's shop back in Iowa, the three of them formed a television family that felt genuine because it was genuine. Behind the smiles and the great finds and the road trip laughs, Frank Fritz was quietly fighting a war on multiple fronts. For more than 30 years, longer than the show had even been an idea, Frank had been living with Crohn's disease, a severe chronic inflammatory condition of the digestive system. There is no cure for Crohn's disease. Frank described it in a 2021 interview as being like a dragon that never fully goes away. Every day is a crapshoot, he said, explaining that one day he could eat anything without issue, and the next, something as simple as scrambled eggs could send him into a painful flare-up. Crohn's disease is brutal under normal circumstances. For someone logging thousands of miles on the road each year, lifting heavy antiques, filming in all-weather conditions, and maintaining a demanding production schedule, it was an enormous and often invisible burden. Frank hid it remarkably well on camera, but those close to him knew the toll it was taking. Then came his back. Years of picking, the lifting, the bending, the digging through overcrowded barns and storage units had slowly destroyed Frank's spine. By 2020, the damage had become critical. Doctors discovered his spine was on the verge of splitting in half. The surgery required to fix it was extensive and grueling. 2 metal rods inserted directly into his spine, 185 stitches, and a long and painful recovery that would keep him off camera indefinitely. Frank stepped away from American Pickers in 2020 to have that surgery. He also, during his recovery, made another major decision. He quit drinking alcohol. He had struggled with alcohol addiction for years, and his time away from the show gave him the space and the motivation to confront it. He lost 65 pounds during his recovery, crediting exercise and sobriety. From the outside, it looked like a man rebuilding himself. From the inside, Frank was fighting as hard as he ever had. While Frank was recovering from surgery, trying to get sober, and dealing with Crohn's disease all at once, something happened that cut him perhaps more deeply than any of his physical ailments. Nobody from American Pickers called to check on him. Not the producers. Not the History Channel. And most painfully of all, not Mike Wolfe. Frank and Mike had known each other for more than 40 years. They had grown up in neighboring towns. They had built the show together from scratch, hand-delivering DVDs at swap meets when no network would give them the time of day. And yet when Frank was lying at home recovering from back surgery that required 2 rods and nearly 200 stitches, Mike never picked up the phone. "I haven't talked to Mike in 2 years," Frank confirmed in a 2021 interview. "He knew my back was messed up, but he didn't call me up and ask how I was doing. That's just how it is." The silence from the show's inner circle was more than a personal wound. It was soon followed by something even more painful, the realization that he wasn't coming back. In July 2021, Mike Wolfe took to Instagram to announce that Frank Fritz would no longer be part of American Pickers. The History Channel followed with a brief, emotionless statement confirming Frank's departure. Frank had been replaced by Mike's brother, Robert Wolfe. After more than a decade on one of television's most popular reality shows, Frank Fritz was gone, not with a proper farewell, not with a tribute episode, not even with a meaningful conversation. Just a social media post and a short press release. Frank was direct about how he felt. He told The Sun that he hadn't left the show, that the show had simply chosen not to bring him back. "I didn't leave the show," he said. "It ain't gonna affect me one bit. It's up to the network whether I come back on the show." But beneath those defiant words was unmistakable hurt. Danielle Colby made a cryptic Instagram comment suggesting that people needed to take responsibility for the pain they cause others, widely interpreted as a reference to Frank's struggles with alcohol and their impact on production. The public falling out was messy, painful, and deeply human. Frank had spoken publicly about wanting to return to American Pickers. Despite everything, the firing, the feud, the silence, he still held out hope. In August 2023, sources close to him said Frank was even watching new episodes of the show and looking forward to the possibility of going back. He was sober. He was recovering. He was still Frank Fritz, the man who could find treasure where nobody else even thought to look. But fate had other plans. On July 14, 2022, a friend found Frank Fritz unresponsive inside his Davenport, Iowa home and called 911. He had suffered a massive stroke. He was rushed to the hospital, and when he emerged, the man who had spent his whole life moving through barns and back roads and open highways was now confined to a wheelchair. The stroke affected the entire right side of his body. His speech was severely impaired. His ability to make decisions was compromised to the point where a conservatorship was established, a trusted friend was appointed as his personal guardian, and Midwest One Bank was appointed as conservator of his finances. The man who had once haggled over prices with colorful characters across America, who had spotted rare treasures inside burned-out buildings and dusty storage units, now needed help with daily tasks like grocery shopping and cooking. Physical therapy became the focus of every day. Recovery was slow, uncertain, and heartbreaking for those who loved him. The stroke, for all the bitterness that had surrounded his departure from the show, did prompt one genuine moment of reconciliation. Mike Wolfe, to his credit, set aside whatever personal grievances existed between them. In May 2023, over Memorial Day weekend, Frank and Mike reunited for the first time in years, brought together by a mutual friend. A source close to the situation said simply, "Everything between them is fine." They've known each other for 40 years. By 2024, Frank Fritz was living in an assisted living facility in Iowa, continuing physical therapy. His antique store, Frank Fritz Finds, was still listed as open as late as June 2024, a small but meaningful connection to the life he had built with his own two hands. Insiders said he was working hard not to push himself too far. He was finding motivation to communicate verbally, though his mobility remained severely limited. Friends who visited him described the scene with heartbreak, one side of his body essentially unresponsive, his arm lifted only to drop back down. On September 30th, 2024, Frank Fritz passed away. He was 60 years old. The cause of death, confirmed by his death certificate obtained by TMZ, was listed as late sequela of cerebral infarction, the lasting damage of a stroke, with contributing factors including aortic stenosis and COPD. His longtime manager, Bill Stanky, confirmed the news. The History Channel and Cineflex Productions released a statement calling Frank the bearded charmer and expressing deep sadness at the loss of their friend and colleague. Mike Wolfe shared a broken-hearted post on Instagram. "It's with a broken heart that I share with all of you that Frank passed away last night. I've known Frank for more than half my life, and what you've seen on TV has always been what I have seen, a dreamer who was just as sensitive as he was funny." Frank Fritz was not a complicated person at his core. He was a kid from Davenport who loved digging through old barns, who grew up to share that love with millions of strangers on television, and who spent his whole life believing that forgotten things deserved to be remembered. He had flaws. He struggled with his health, with alcohol, with the pressures of fame. He fought battles that most of us never see. And in the end, those battles caught up with him. But here is what truly matters. Frank Fritz made people feel something real. In a television landscape filled with manufactured drama and scripted outrage, he was genuinely, undeniably himself. The rust on a vintage motorcycle sign excited him just as much in Season 15 as it did in Season 1. He could not fake enthusiasm for something he didn't believe in, and he never tried to. That authenticity is rare in any business, and rarer still on television. His story is also ultimately a cautionary one. It is a reminder that fame is borrowed, not owned. That the spotlight can disappear faster than it arrives. That health, friendship, and sobriety are not luxuries, they are everything. Frank Fritz spent years fighting on multiple fronts, and while the final outcome is deeply sad, the fight itself tells you everything about who he was: stubborn, resilient, passionate, and deeply human. The barns will keep holding their secrets. The rusty signs will keep leaning against forgotten walls. But the man who could look at all of it and see something worth saving, that man was one of a kind. And television, and the people who loved him, will not see his like again for a very long time. Rest in peace, Frank Fritz. The treasure hunt was always better with you in it.